prospectus supermax prisons like TAMS and Nationwide, they say they're designed for the so-called worst of the worst, but that is in fact not the case. And that people are arbitrarily put in these supermax prisons where they're held in isolation 24 hours a day. They have no communal activity whatsoever. They have no human contact. And as Daryl describes, in many cases it drives people insane. And so in Daryl's case, it's because of his leadership and his respect from other prisoners that they decided he was a threat and they put him in. In other instances, it's individuals who are jailhouse lawyers who are really great at advocating and suing the prison system, and they're put in supermax prisons. But I think Daryl's story is emblematic in that he had done nothing wrong whatsoever, but he was still transferred into this heinous prison situation.
Ms. Joy, you said the Justice Department, you made strides with the Justice Department. So my question is, how does the dynamic change on the federal level since we have an African-American president and an African-American as the Attorney General?
That's a great question. I mean, I think that there's been a lot of differences. This is one thing that I support the Obama administration and the Department of Justice on. They've done a lot of work to actually hold police and other prison officials responsible for their heinous violations of the Constitution. So under the Obama administration, for example, we've seen them go down to New Orleans and go after and enter into a consent decree holding the New Orleans Police Department responsible for its violations and many of its racist and gender-based violations. With respect to individuals in New Orleans, not only have they found heinous instances of racial violence and by the police officers, but they also found that LGBT individuals are being persecuted and targeted by New Orleans police officers as well. And they've now enacted a consent decree to try to clean up that police department and make changes. I do believe that is important for us to try to work with the Department of Justice, and I do believe the Department of Justice is much more effective now during the Obama administration. That said, I will still say I'm disappointed with many of the stances the Obama administration's taken on the war on terror, and I don't believe it's very much different than the Bush administration, but domestically, they are doing a better job, in my opinion.
It's more of a, what do you appreciate most in life?
You say who?
What do you appreciate most in life?
What do I appreciate most in life? The mere fact that I can get up at will and walk outside. You know? It's the most powerful thing in life. Like for me, when I came home, it was a culture shock. You know, when I left and went to prison, you couldn't make a right-hand turn on a red light. Now, in most corners, you can. Even though I got a $100 ticket, because I took it for granted that when I pulled up at this corner, the light was red, and I made a right-hand turn, and the camera clicked off, and I couldn't understand it. And so I'm studying learning that you got to look at the signs. In some areas, you cannot make that right-hand turn, but it's the basic things that I'm still adjusting to. My internal system is still adjusting to food. A lot of times, my best friend is Pepto-Bismol. That's my best friend, because a lot of times if I go places, before I get there, I keep some in the car, shake it up, hit it a little bit, okay, now I'm ready. But it's the basic things that people take for granted. Daryl Cannon doesn't. I got a job, and sometimes I may go in the daytime, come out at night. What I remember in town, Supermax, I used to get up in my bed, look out the window, and watch the sunset. And then, it was so good. And I had said that whenever God blessed me with my freedom, the first time I went to work, and then I came outside in the night, I would thank God for allowing me to have my freedom to be up under the good side. So it's the basic thing.
Are you proud of yourself?
Am I proud of myself? Oh, yes, ma'am. Make no mistake about that. You know, Daryl Cannon has no regrets other than the fact that I wasn't. I wasn't there to kiss my loved ones one more time before they put them in the ground. Now that is the only thing that I regret. Other than that, everything else I've experienced, I felt that God had a reason for me experiencing it. And Daryl Cannon has no regrets. Like I said, anytime I look in the mirror, I like what I see. You know, I have no problem with that. So no matter.
Well, I wanted to ask, with the current mayor and the current police commander and the current state's attorneys, is the level of corruption increased or decreased, or is it the same? How would you characterize where we're at now in 2012?
I mean, I would say, you know, I just think, you know, power concedes nothing without its man. And I guess that said is some things have changed, but unfortunately too much has stayed the same. So for example, as you'll know, Daryl Cannon, and he should be proud of himself. Shortly after Daryl was tortured, and while he was facing murder charges, Daryl himself, while in jail, drew sketches that described the torture he suffered. And then he proceeded to file a pro se complaint on his own behalf. He's not a lawyer. He's in jail. He can barely get access to paper and a pencil. And he filed his own pro se lawsuit to challenge the torture he endured and to complain of this injustice. And I want to tell you folks, that takes courage. And that takes wherewithal. And it should be commended, you know. And as a result of that, what ended up happening is he was appointed a lawyer, and he was eventually convicted. And after being convicted, he ended up settling his lawsuit for a total of $3,000 because it didn't look like justice was coming. And after Daryl, after 23 years, fought his conviction, and as he said, worked with his lawyers and continued to get up day by day to fight the injustice he was suffering, his conviction was vacated and he was released. We then filed a lawsuit on Daryl's behalf, saying that he was wrongfully convicted. And what they said is that lawsuit that he settled back in the 80s, while he remained convicted, while the mountains of evidence regarding the torture had not been unearthed, they are saying that settlement should be enough, and he should not be able to claim any more money or seek any more justice in the courts. And so we lost the case in the district court, and it's now on appeal. The city is choosing to still fight that appeal. I don't think that's the correct decision on behalf of the city, and that is under Mayor Emanuel's administration. Meanwhile, there are other individuals. Ronald Kitchen, for one, is a torture survivor who was on death row. He did 21 years for a crime he did not commit. He was ultimately exonerated, received a certificate of innocence, and he's now suing. He is continuing to have to sue. The city continues to pay lawyers thousands and thousands of dollars. At this point, it's over millions of dollars that they've paid the lawyers defending Burge and other city officials in Ronald Kitchen's case, as opposed to saying, you know, we should pay him his due and we should, bring justice in these cases. That said, I want to raise some other issues that we're currently fighting for. You know, we recently decided to draft a city council ordinance seeking reparations for the torture survivors. The fact is, hundreds of the torture survivors were tortured and they were convicted, and they have never ever had the opportunity to sue. And they no longer can, for the most part, because the statute of limitations has expired. That said, they still, like Daryl, suffer psychologically from the torture they endured. They have nightmares, they're overwhelmed. Some of them have moved out of the city because they cannot even stand the sight of looking at a police officer from Chicago ever again. We, as a city, owe them reparations. We owe them financial compensation, we owe them psychological counseling, we owe them vocational training. It is our duty to make them whole. You know, the city of Chicago, nor any of the other local bodies have ever come forth to provide reparations for the torture survivors. And so that is a call for justice that we're going to be seeking very soon. And I would like to think, I would hope that the city would do better at this, but I'm not hopeful. I don't think it's going to happen unless we all come together and we struggle and we fight until we make this city happen. there have been some recent exonerations. And for example, you'll hear from Josh Tupfer next week about some exonerations. But again, those were long fought cases, litigation cases, and I don't think that they have gone and re-examined these cases. You'll hear that after these exonerations, I don't see Anita Alvarez starting to re-examine all these cases and to see what went wrong and how to improve it. I mean, she's now starting to say that's going to happen, but honestly, I don't see much changes. I'm hopeful, and I know that people are agitating for it. And let me be clear, that's not to say that there aren't some good people in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office or there aren't some individuals in city administration that are pushing for it. But I'm not going to say that these new administrations mean there's a new dawn of justice in this era. That's just not the case.
Absolutely. Good.